Yo, thank you for checking out my From Season 2, Episode 1 recap, analysis, reaction. This show, if you haven't started watching this show, you should. This episode, man, there's so many things to unpack, even beginning with the show's title. The show's title is Strangers in a Strange Land, which is actually a 1961 science fiction novel by American author Robert A. Heinlein. It tells the story of Valentine Michael Smith, a human who comes to Earth in early adulthood after being born on the planet Mars and raised by Martians. It explores his interactions with an eventual transformation of Terran culture. Before we go any deeper than this, do me a favor. If you enjoy this video, then before you go, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Now, the episode opens with Sheriff Boyd walking through town, ringing his bell, similar to the opening of season 1. But what's different is he doesn't see any other people. That's because the sheriff isn't actually in town. He's actually where we left him at the end of last season, which looks to be the bottom of maybe a well, after having hopped into a faraway tree at the behest of Sarah and the boy in white. We don't know how long Boyd has been at the bottom of this well, and let's be honest, we have no idea how much time is passing at any given moment. But once Boyd awakens from his dream, he immediately tries to figure out a way to get out from the bottom of this hole. Now, what's really cool about this episode is that we get to pick right back up on that bus that drove into town during the finale of last season. Now, this bus being introduced at the end of last season was just the icing on the cake of a season that had me screaming at the TV for answers, with the finale introducing a lot of plot points that we hope to explore more in season 2. Now, inside that bus, we see a young man that we'll later learn is named Elgin. He seems to recognize the town, and he panics when he wakes from his sleep and sees where the driver is taking them. Now, this is extremely interesting because I'm curious how he could possibly recognize this town. I mean, nobody in this show knows where they are, so the fact that he's alarmed and starts yelling that they shouldn't be there is straight up intriguing. Now, we also revisit Colony House, where we last saw Donna and Jade frantically trying to salvage the radio system that they assembled in hopes of trying to contact the outside world in the season finale. Now, you might remember that at the end of the last season, that a ridiculously crazy storm appeared right as they began using their radio and threatened their efforts to contact the outside world for help. This has me thinking that these characters are definitely being held prisoner in a controlled environment where the basic principles of science and environment are under the complete control of their captors, from weather to gravity. More on that gravity part a bit later. But I feel like the storm appearing in the sky is a direct response from their captors, who seem to be able to observe the people in this town from a remote location. As we switch back to what's going on inside Colony House, we see that the light bulbs in the sockets that they were using to power the radio explode, and glass shards fly everywhere, including into a woman's eye. I can't help but wonder what caused the light bulbs to explode. We know that the outlets don't actually provide power to the light bulb, so what could have caused them to build up electricity and explode as if it was reacting to the weather? By the way, this glass scene is gruesome. Now, Jade then sees at the same time as he's trying to save the radio that there is a bus in front of the diner, and he quickly tells Donna. Now, I love how this show built so much excitement in the finale and in this episode, with so many things happening at once, but somehow it's not overwhelming and you can actually follow along with all the different calamities that are happening at the same time. Now hold on, because we're about to switch again. We then switch over to Jim, who, after hearing a mysterious voice on the radio warn him that his wife shouldn't be digging that hole, he frantically runs to check on the status of his wife, Tabitha, as if it was a threat. And between you and me, I took that as a threat too. This show already makes me feel like nobody is safe. So The last thing I need is for someone in the main cast to get singled out like that. Jim arrives at the house that they're living in, that his wife Tabitha was investigating the source of the electricity in the homes by digging a hole down to find out what was at their source. And it's at that point that Jim sees Tabitha's not there anymore. And a big part of the house collapsed down onto where, in his mind, where his wife should be. It doesn't take long for Jim to start trying to dig his wife out from under that hole. Now, what Jim doesn't know is that Tabitha is already gone. She met up with Victor, who's moving through the tunnels under the town to try to get Tabitha to safety. It's here that Victor tells us that the boy in white told Victor to go into a faraway tree to meet up with Tabitha and show her where to hide. He also tells Tabitha that this is where the monsters sleep and she needs to be quiet. Next, we actually see Tabitha find a mysterious looking suitcase on the floor, and she opens it up to find a white dress inside that seems to be her size. What I find particularly interesting is the expression on Victor's face when he sees the suitcase. It's almost as if he recognizes it. He then urges Tabitha to continue along as she leaves the dress behind. We then switch back to Colony House, where Donna tells Kenny that they need to get some shotguns and get down to that bus. We switch back to the bus, and I have to admit that I like this new group of characters so far. We see one of them just making the most of things and dancing in the rain. We also get back to Elgin on the bus, who is still freaking everyone out by speaking cryptically and seeming like he knows where they are and the level of danger that they're actually in. But yo, this bus driver just keeps doing the most. She just keeps giving these passengers so much attitude. I'm like, yo, please chill. We switch back to Jim, who's trying to dig out the hole, and Julie walks in to check on her parents. Julie then reminds us that she's actually still just human and a kid, and just freezes for a moment after feeling overwhelmed by everything that's happening. Jim then sends Julie to get help, and she immediately runs towards this new group of people who happen to be right outside the house in front of the diner. A few of them volunteer to help Jim try to save Tabitha, and that's when Donna, Kenny, and 3 randoms from Colony House show up in a minivan to tell this group of people that today is the worst day of their lives. Kenny tries to corral everyone into the diner to drink some tea as we switch back to Jim, who's just elated to see people coming to help him as he desperately tries to dig up the rubble with his bare hands to save his wife. So the bartender and 2 people from the bus show up, and the bartender asks the smartest question in the room. If Tabitha was digging a hole in the basement, then what the heck caused the entire ceiling upstairs to collapse on where she was standing? Now, if you remember earlier, I mentioned that I have a theory that the people observing, or the beings observing and keeping these people prisoner, are able to control the environment and weather while mysteriously observing things that are happening in town. I think this was a direct response to those beings not being happy with Tabitha digging that hole and attempting to take her out for getting too close to something they don't want her to find. Now, it's not clear if whoever was speaking on the radio with Jim is the same being that caused the floor to collapse, but it's a definite possibility. The second they touch the rubble, more of the ceiling starts shifting. We switch back to Tabitha and Victor making their way through the tunnels when they come across the oddest sight of a group of rats eating a crow. Now, we know that crows are among the first things people see right before they end up in this town, along with a knocked over tree. I am curious if this is iconography foreshadowing future events, but it sure as hell doesn't look good. We then quickly shift back to Sheriff Boyd. Remember him? Who's still where we left him at the beginning of the episode, at the bottom of this hole, unable to escape. After a long time of screaming for help, Sheriff Boyd finally hears someone answer his cries. The mysterious voice at the top of the hole asks Boyd if he's real. And understandably, Boyd asks him right back, "Are you real?" The voice says that he can help Boyd if he promises to help him. He then urges Boyd to climb out of the hole because he'll be back soon. First off, who the heck is he, right? That's a big question, but whoever is up there speaking to Boyd is able to throw down a rope to Boyd to help him in his climb. But how the hell did this man throw this rope? You know, we're going to have to come back to this one in a minute, but there's a lot of questions that are set up in this moment. Next, we switch back to Jade at Colony House, who's promptly rolling himself a joint. And while speaking to the woman who got glass in her eye earlier in the episode, the woman asks Jade a question and wonders if we made them angry, and that's why they sent the storm. And that's a good question because she and I are on the same page. Next thing we know, as she exits the room, that crazy symbol appears on the wall. It's that same symbol Jade had been investigating in season 1, but this time it's appearing on the wall on its own in blood, or at least red, but it looks like blood. And then a little doll or mannequin or something appears next to Jade and like out of nowhere and freaks him out. And it makes like a loud noise. The way Jade is, he just yells right back at it. And I'm just wondering to myself, what in the Harley Quinn is going on here? Now, you should remember this symbol. Like I said, Jade discovered it in season 1. He found it in a book. He found drawings of it in the cellar outside of town, and it's making him get obsessed with their meaning. We switch to Ethan, who's still in Colony House, where his entire family seems to have left him behind on its own. You know, it's always incredible to me how much this family seems to care about each other, and yet they constantly leave their most vulnerable members alone. I can't even remember the last time we saw all 4 of them in the same place. I haven't seen a family this disconnected and distant since the Starks in Game of Thrones. We never saw them united again after that first episode. Anyway, Ethan walks into the living room and is speaking with Kenny's mom, who's cleaning up all the light bulbs that were broken. He asked Mrs. Chen how she thinks the lights broke and if the others will be back soon. She assures Ethan that she will protect him. Ethan mentions that the quest can be scary, and sometimes when you get to the end, that's when things get really scary. Ethan has mentioned this quest in the past and stated that he thinks that they're all part of this mysterious quest without realizing it. We still don't know what role Ethan plays in all of this, but the show constantly hints that he might know something. I just hope this pays off and this doesn't end up a disappointing storyline like Bran Stark in Game of Thrones. Ethan then talks to Jade, and Jane is finally smoking his joint. He's trying to get over his many failed attempts of making a working radio. Ethan then mentions the Chromonocle and begins to tell him a story before Jade cuts him off. Now, this show loves the Chromonocle, and I'm still confused by this one. We then switch back to Tabitha and Victor in the caves, where they come across some of the sleeping monsters, but also an assortment of household items and furniture covered in dust. All of the items look really old. Now, there are a few monsters in this cave with Tabitha and Victor, and we see that weird-looking doll mannequin toy that Jade saw earlier. Victor spots it, and he gets spooked out and runs off, leaving Tabitha behind. She finds him in another room in the cavern, sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth in the fetal position. Now, I think this is really interesting because this might be the first time we've actually seen Victor scared. What was it about that doll that has this man terrified? Tabitha gives Victor her best pep talk to get him up and to continue on their journey. We switch back to Jade, who is in Victor's room going through all of his stuff. Now, Jade is here because he wants to look for clues. It's at this time that Ethan mentions that Victor is out playing his part in the quest, and that's what this is. Now, this catches Jade's attention for a while, and he takes notice of young Ethan. He then shares with Ethan that he keeps seeing this symbol over and over again. He also shares with Ethan a photo that he found in the book with all of the symbols of a man holding the journal, as well as a young Victor in the background holding his lunchbox. Jade theorizes that since Victor has been here so long that he likely knows what the symbols mean. Ethan then mentions that there are always symbols in quests, but they need to find out if they're good symbols or bad symbols, and the bad symbols sometimes make you do bad things. Jade is rightfully startled by Ethan's comments. Like, the things that this kid is saying almost make sense, and if that's true, then things are more terrifying than some of these people have imagined. We finally switch back to Donna, who is speaking to the bus driver and is trying to tell her that today is the worst day of her life. Now, this bus driver is still giving all the attitude, is not trying to hear any of Donna's shit, and urges her to move out the way so she can get back on the road. Now, I feel like Donna started crossing some lines here, because it's at this moment she decides to put her hands on this driver. I know in my experience, the moment you violate someone's personal space like that, you might get some hands thrown at your face. I praise this woman for her restraint, because she totally would be in the right to lay Donna out for touching her. But Donna is just trying to help, so let's move on. We switch back to Jim, the bartender, and the two guys from the bus who are trying to help Jim dig up the rubble to see if they can rescue Tabitha. Jim still doesn't know that Tabitha is long gone, and he's just determined. Jim then notices that there's a chamber underneath, and the moment that they were about to make some progress and possibly get through to the chamber, more of the house above them starts to crumble on top of them. We then switch back to Elgin, remember him? Who's getting his bearings after having a panic attack earlier on the bus. Elgin takes maybe 2 or 3 steps off the bus and immediately falls to the floor and begins to have seizures. Now, this is interesting because this isn't the first person we've seen have seizures when they arrived in town. You might remember back in season 1 that Ethan began to have seizures also when he was in the RV in the first season when his leg got impaled. We don't know what the seizures mean, but this might mean that Elgin and Ethan may have more in common that will be revealed in future episodes. We switch back and forth between Jim and Elgin, and as Elgin is having his seizure, more and more of the house begins to collapse on top of Jim and the others who are digging the hole. And that's when the entire house collapses on top of them. Now, we have no idea why on earth a house just collapses into itself, but this also seems like a reaction to what Jim is doing. Julie and the others rush over toward the house, and we see that Jim, while still alive, is pinned under a lot of rubble. Julie, Donna, Kenny, and the others begin to assess the situation and see how they might be able to rescue these guys. But every time they try to move something, more and more of the rubble of the house begins to shift as if more of the house is still collapsing. One person was able to climb out, and the paramedic comes over and checks on him while pulling him from the rubble. We switch back to Tabitha and Victor making their way through the caves until they come along some weird stacked stones in the middle of one of the chambers. Then suddenly a rock is rolled from another chamber in the cave, which seems to have bars caging someone or something inside. We then see what looks like a little girl monster that freaks me and Tabitha out. We also see that it's getting closer to sunset, and the monsters in the cave are starting to wake up, and they're walking toward them. Tabitha and Victor make a run for it, and we switch back to the people who are checking on Elgin and the people who are trying to help the guys from the rubble. It's in that moment that we see Christy, the EMT, turn around and sees a familiar face sitting next to Elgin. They lock eyes for a moment, and yes, Christy is finally reunited with her fiance. Yep, I didn't see it coming either, but Kenny sees this too, and man, the look of dejection on Kenny's face, I feel for this dude because he was shooting his shot all season, and he was finally making some progress too. We then switch back to Boyd. Oh yeah, Boyd, remember him? He's finally climbing up out of that hole to the top. We then switch back to Tabitha and Victor, who finally find an exit out of that cave and find themselves in the woods. Tabitha and Victor make a run for it because again, it's getting dark outside. We switch back to Julie and the group of people who are digging up the rubble to try and save Jim. The problem is that the more they move things, the more the rubble begins to collapse on Jim and the others who are trapped underneath. Because it's getting super late in the day and there's just not enough time to do things slowly, Jim regretfully advises everyone that they leave them behind for now. Donna agrees and assures Julie that she survived for a long time by hiding, and there's a good chance that Jim can too. The other problem is that the bus driver is still not trying to hear any of Donna's shit and wants all the passengers to get on the bus so they can get back on the road. Donna is running low on patience and is tired of being nice and lets them know that anybody who gets on this bus is gonna die. Anybody who wants to live needs to get back inside the diner. Again, Donna is very low on patience, and before anyone can make any sense, Donna whips out her shotgun and pops a bullet in the tire of the bus. This freaks the passengers out, and they start to scatter in fear. But since they're low on time, Kenny follows after Donna's lead and pops one off in the air too. And he starts yelling at these people to get inside the diner now. Some people listen, but some others just went off running. Jim lets Julie know about the cavern beneath the house and that he believes Tabitha is still alive. She hears this and seems to get some comfort, but is still devastated by the fact that she has to leave her dad behind in all that rubble. The group of people from the bus head into the diner. We switch back to Boyd as well, who finally makes it to the top of the well, and he comes face to face with the most surprising figure that I didn't expect to see. He sees a skinny, shriveled old man with a mountain man beard chained to a wall. Boyd is freaked out and pulls out a gun on the old man, who's happy to see Boyd is armed and tells Boyd that he needs Boyd to kill him. End credits. Now, I was looking at this scene pretty hard because for the life of me, I cannot understand how this man, who is chained on this wall way over there, was able to throw a rope down into the hole to Boyd way over there. This just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, but if you come in from expecting to understand everything that is happening, then you probably missed the point of this show. Overall, I think this was a fantastic first episode that picks up all the energy from the thrilling season finale. It introduces new characters, sets up new plot points, and leaves me wanting more by the time the credits roll. I cannot get enough of this show, and this one has me on the edge of my seats for the next episode. What do you think is going on with the symbols, and why Victor is having all of these visions? What is the meaning of Elgin and Ethan having seizures as they arrive in town? What the heck does the symbolism of the crows mean in this episode, both on Elgin's t-shirt and the crow in the cave that was being eaten by rats? I can't wait to hear your theories, but that's all I have for this one. As usual, hey guys, if you're new here to the movie blog, you want to see more of these breakdowns, do me a favor, hit that like button, make sure you subscribe. Otherwise, gotta check you guys later. Peace.